This week's episode was brought to you by our patrons. If you enjoy The Whole Rabbit and would like to become a bunny, visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your donation of just $5 earns you all our extended episodes, a bonus sticker of our cover art, and access to our Discord server, where Thoth is represented by a robot that reads our tarot cards in real time. It's the kind of thing that would impress your dad in 1992. You really don't know what you're missing out on. This week sees us vivisecting the rainbow and talking about the physics of light as if we're not barred from doing so in at least 29 different states. If you were one of those people holding out for another long-winded, in-depth Qabalah episode, well, here you go. We even sprinkled some physics on top, so without further ado, thank you and enjoy the show. If I ever decide to off myself, I'll check with you first.
Okay, please.
I appreciate.
I'll call you a pussy for rage quitting, and then you'll not do it. Dude was right about wisdom is an experience. It's not really something you can measure or quantify.
Theoria Apophasis. I've been looking for that fellow for over a year.
Cool. I'm glad you found him again. I'm gonna subscribe.
He has 237,000 subscribers, and we just added 2. Shout out. I'd love to have that guy on the show for an interview. But
yeah, he's really great.
To wet our tea bags, how about a conversation about light and astral light?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just satisfy ourselves with discussing
Satan's memories for 2 hours only.
Nay, we gaze with haunting, receptive knowingness at the giant goat lady as we steal away with mouthful after glorious mouthful of her alchemical milk,
so that we may use it to create our own sparkly dollhouse of sentient homunculi that we convince by force of being their artificer that they ought never, ever to know their true self at the threat of eternal torture and obedience paid in their tiny little foreskins. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, and this week I'm joined by the fluffy, cuddly, lovable doggy girl, Lady Queen, Mari Sama. Last week, we roped everyone in with boobies and started reading Eliphas Levi on them like it was bad interpretive comedy, and I was editing the show and thought to myself, here we are, talking about the Baphomet and declaring it an anthropomorphization of the, quote, astral light. But unless you got to hear the extended episode where we discuss the Egyptian roots of this symbol, we don't really discuss much of what the astral light is. We learned that creation with a capital C has something to do with dividing this water, and we see Baphomet apparently dividing and recombining these waters like some kind of fully erect mad scientist using itself as a guinea pig, or in our case, a rabbit.
That's fascinating.
Let me talk a little bit about breast milk.
The Egyptians actually were one of the first cultures to use color therapy on people for healing.
Really?
Yeah, and this is probably a lot of the alchemy stuff came out of this, the alchemical writings about the stages of color in alchemy. So those were based probably directly on Egyptian color healing techniques. There's also records of color healing over near China in the ancient times. So I learned that. That was kind of neat.
This fellow we just called out says that light is a perturbation in a medium, I think, if I understood him correctly.
Pressure waves.
Right. And the ancient Egyptians personified the sky as a giant womb made of water. And this gave birth to Horus, which was the son of Hathor, which was the sky. It sounds like they knew that light was a perturbation in the medium, because that's how they decided to represent the medium, or the thing that light was traveling through. Like Horus was traveling through the water. That was the metaphor.
Which it carries the life. Or the light in this case.
Yes.
Or it is also a container or a vessel for life, which I think that's a really cool euphemism, because it is like the universe is kind of a substance or an ether, and in and of itself, it's one object, if you zoom out far enough. And the fact that they portray it as a watery vessel in which life can move inside of it and live inside of it.
They made the soul blue partially because of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and also it's just associated with water in general.
Water and life. Oh, yeah.
It's one of the most plentiful, because you see so much water on Earth, it's one of the most common colors you see.
And if the air is the type of water and water is the type of water,
yeah.
You kind of need it. It's kind of lifelike in that way, and it all looks blue, so.
Yeah, the sky. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And I had to try really fucking hard to figure out why Netzach was green. And gosh darn it, I got an answer that satisfied me. So let's get started on the astral light, starting with what Israel Regardie has to say about it. Which was funny. He was one of the people that got called out by Mota in our OTO episode. Is like, he is not OTO. Don't talk to him. Anyway, let's continue.
Vibrating at another rate of motion than does
The gross substance of the physical world, and thus existing on a higher plane, the astral light contains the builder's plan or model, so to speak, projected downwards by the ideation or imagination of the Father, the plan on which the external world is constructed, and within whose essence lies latent the potentiality of all growth and development. All of the forces and ideas from the creative and archetypal realms are represented and focused in this plastic agent, the formative world. It is at once substance and motion, the movement being one which is simultaneous and perpetual in spiral lines of opposite motion.
Wow. Yeah. And then what he's talking about when he's talking about astral light, also, that's very much like the morphogenetic fields that Rupert Sheldrake talks about.
Ooh, morphogenetic fields. What are morphogenetic fields, Mari?
Well, it's just a theory by Rupert Sheldrake, if anyone's interested in this, but he was talking about the same phenomena of the astral light that you just quoted. It basically filters down into the material world, and it's a certain type of energetic field. And what it does is it attracts matter to coalesce in certain areas. So that's how tissues and structures are built. Like that's how plants and animals grow, is these fields are already in the ether. And then when the tissue is growing, it just starts to gravitate towards certain areas and it makes this structure.
Kind of like every human is a waterfall or a tornado.
Yeah, it has to do with your energy fields, but it's the part of the energy field that provides the information for where the matter is supposed to coalesce. So what they're saying is it's a top-down thing. Like the astral light from the higher dimensions beams down into this dimension, and our bodies and our vessels, the physical matter that coalesce, it's like it is a vessel. It's a container for the light, for the astral light to live in, which is what I think we are. So that's what I'm saying is it creates its own container by condensing matter.
This is
with these fields.
Sorry,
but it's all energetics. Just like that guy was saying, it has to do with the transference of pressure. So wherever there's low pressure, or I don't know really how it works, but if there's a polarized pressure, there's going to be matter developing in that area.
Now, Mari, didn't morphogenetic fields also have something to do with how dogs know when their owners are coming home magically?
Well, he starts to link it into the psi phenomena, where scientists are afraid to talk about psi or psychic things or spiritual fields or any of that kind of like this spiritual energy. So it links into that because it might have, I think he's starting to think that it might be the same type of energy. Like, when people say they're psychic or they can read your mind or remote view, he's thinking it might be the same type of energy field that's affected. What I mean by that is, like, if you want to look into modern stuff, there is still people thinking about this concept because it's timeless, because I think it's closer to the truth than a lot of the stuff we have.
Okay, so we know that light already has something to do with spiral lines of opposite motion, and that's regular light. So electromagnetism, and how they they alternate back and forth between each other, and that's what we're told light is.
But it creates the spiral because of the transverse waves, because magnetism goes on one plane and then it's perpendicular to it, the light wave, or intersects it. So that's what an electromagnetic wave is. That's why it looks like a spiral in three-dimensional space, because it's oscillating it's oscillating in actually 3 dimensions.
And the thing that Theoria Apophasis was talking about, and Pope Pete is talking about, is that this occurs in some sort of an ether.
Yes, like a substrate. So if you're a fish in the ocean, your ether would be water. I mean, as an example.
Perfect way to explain it. Now, Pope Pete says here, basically, that the astral light, or the ether, has been renamed the space-time continuum, or the space-time manifold. He says,
recent years have seen in the realm of scientific speculation the development of the electromagnetic theory, which for practical purposes of physics discards as unnecessary the Victorian hypothesis of an all-pervading undulating luminiferous ether. In its stead, there has been set up on a lofty throne, crowned and worshipped with devotion, an even more abstract mathematica conception, the space-time manifold or continuum. One group of scientists are wholly in favor of retaining the ether hypothesis, while several others, no less well-known and no less authoritative, are equally certain that no such subtle structure as an ether is existent or even possible. They admit it only as a theoretical frame of reference, in any which case it assumes the role of a working hypothesis without any degree of objective actuality. Yet, an examination of the scientific definitions of both these scientific groups reveals the fact that by the ether and four-dimensional space-time continuum, one and the same concept is entertained. So he's saying the ether's a thing.
And it probably is, because even in quantum physics, and even string theory, like modern string theory with Brian Greene was talking about this concept, is at the very lowest level, like the Planck length, you have a sea of they call it quantum foam. So it's just all these like subatomic particles popping in and out of existence randomly. So it's like this fuzziness, like, you know, when you turn on your TV set and there's static, it's like that. So you could propagate a wave through the TV set and make a pattern, like an interference pattern, and create a picture that way. So I think that's what they mean. Like, quantum physics is even admitting there's an ether, and they're not even calling it that, basically. Like, there's no getting around that point. And then that thing I talked to you about earlier, that little pin toy, where it's like a pin cushion and you turn it around and you can make a sculpture out of your hand because all the pins fall on your hands.
Right. So instead of imagining...
That's the ether.
Okay. So yeah, instead of imagining light as a little packet that gets like thrown off from something as it's emitted, you're imagining like a big soup, and that soup is like those little pins that you're talking about. And then as the energy runs into each new pin, it like causes the pin to like go up or down.
Right. On a polar axis. So you have positive and negative. You have, and like even in quantum physics, in modern particle physics, you have antimatter and matter. You even have a positron. Like the antimatter for an electron would be a positron. So everything's like opposite world. Okay. So they have this. That's what he was saying. The duality is kind of a false structure because both of those things are one and the same. It's a pin either up or in an upstate or a downstate. And the thing is because it's over multiple. It's in higher dimensions. There's multiple states one thing could be. So any one point could have these multiple states, and then we see them as particles. We see them as different particles, but they're just states that point can have at any given time, depending on the amount of energy that it's going through. Energy as in light, basically, that is going through it. So a good example of, like, if you're trying to imagine what this would look like, okay, you're like, well, I can see the light go through the air. It's moving. Like that's a physical quantity of something that I can measure. It's like, yes, but the ether is like, if you're at the sports stadium, remember how everyone starts doing the wave and no one can resist because it's so fun?
It's like that.
If you ever watch a wave go around the stadium, it's like people aren't running around the stadium in a circle. Okay.
They're really not. They're
not moving. Everyone's standing in the same place. And whenever the wave hits you, you just kind of know to stand up and throw your arms in the air. And from far away, what do? It looks like you're transferring energy. The crowd is physically transferring energy by basically being next to each other. They're like, if you see someone stand up next to you, then you go. And that's basically like how the particles will transfer the energy to one another. So it moves from one person into the next.
The people are the ether in this metaphor.
Yeah, they're the little Planck points, the smallest points on the fabric of space-time. And so as the energy permeates through it, it's not like the energy is a physical particle that flies through a vacuum of space. It's not like the stadium is empty and there's this like, you know, like Kamehameha ball like going through the stadium by itself. That's not how energy works.
So hear me out.
It's that the people are transferring the energy by doing the wave.
Okay, so but in what we're talking about, like light and electro and magnetism, so the wave isn't just waving up and down, it's waving like side to side too. So it's a really funny looking wave. So this would be a really strange looking auditorium.
It's like we see waves on screens in like 2 dimensions. So if you could imagine it being waving in 2 and the 3rd dimension at the same time, that's why it looks like a spiral to us, because it's oscillating both up and down and back and forth at the same time. So if you look at one point on that wave, it's going to appear to go in this spiral circle if you track it.
You got to type in electromagnetism in Google. We'll put it in the sources. It's the devil card in the tarot. I keep saying that like I'm a crazy person. If you listen to the show long enough, you'll be like, oh, that's what he means. Anyway, let's get into what Pope Pete has to say about how astral light vibrates. From the practical viewpoint, this plane is the magical agent to which the accumulated trained vision of the theurgist has assigned the power of transmitting vibrations and impressions, not alone of physical light, heat, and sound, but those more subtle and less
less tangible vibrations. None of the less real, however, because of their imperceptibility, which pertain to projected currents of will, thought, and feeling. So he say psychic also go through ether.
Yeah, that's what Rupert Sheldrake, I think, is trying to tell people. That's why I love to look at his work.
So the second your mind ventures over to home, it like pingles a little something in your dog's like, I felt the pingle.
Well, it's interesting. It's harder to explain than that, but they can feel your energy reaching out there.
This whole thing makes them sound a lot more like transverse waves than this confusing idea of standing waves. But then if you imagine the crowd doing like the wave like sideways too, like alternatively, that's bizarre. But also it helps to imagine
something else.
Imagine something like waving in a direction that you can't perceive of. That makes way more sense though.
A standing wave is something completely different. A standing wave is different.
It is different, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the way we've described ether, it almost sounds like sound waves rather than what I've learned as sine waves. But we know that light works like...
Correct.
Yeah.
But you can chart it in a cyclical way, in a transverse wave. But that's what I'm saying is just like when like when you're recording and you see the sound wave on the screen, that's not really how sound looks. It's a longitudinal wave. But
it's like
you can
write
it. You can write it like a transverse wave, though. You can write it back and forth, but the way that light or electromagnetism propagates is things bounce, they go up and down, they oscillate up and down. And in longitudinal waves like sound, it's basically a force of compression. So if you could imagine things just like pushing against each other. Like,
I got it.
Yeah.
It's like in Fresno when you go to see Tool and all the little people get smushed against the gate in the front and then they almost die of suffocation until the dudes in orange pull them out. It's like that. That's like sound.
Or a slinky.
A slinky. All the slinkies are spiral. That's confusing.
No, you push it back. You know how you see that line go back and forth between your hands through it, where they all compress together? That's a longitudinal wave, which is what sound is. But you can make
sort of a sine wave looking thing with a slinky too. Now everyone's confused, Mari. It's like if you push it back and like if you're humping.
Well,
and then the other one's like if you're waving it up and down. Oh okay, man, now we've confused everyone.
Here's the main difference, though.
Oh God.
Light does not require matter to propagate through space.
But it does require
sound requires actual physical matter in the atmosphere for it to propagate, which is why in space no one can hear you scream in space. That's because there's no atmosphere to rub against each other to make compression waves loud enough to make a sound.
Yes,
so there's
which is also why TIE fighters
friction.
Wouldn't make any fucking noise, and also why I don't want to hear anyone giving me shit about any unrealistic science bullshit in Star Wars, because nothing has ever made sense in Star Wars except for the Force powers, which is the opposite of what most people think. Anyway, before I make a total asshole of myself here, so the thing that it's moving through is this medium of ether, and to keep going with what Pope Pete has to say, because he says it so well, and he's riffing off of what we read in the last episode, Levi's Rituals and Dogma, Transcendental Magic. He says, the scientific ether, which all can enjoy and which extends through space and time, serving as the medium of vibrations of all kinds, differs in a few essentials from Levi's astral light. The definition perennially insists upon the theurgist concerning this etheric plane is that it is a grade of refined plastic substance, less dense and gross than that which we normally see around us, magnetic and electric in nature, serving as the real ground upon which the forms and congeries of atoms in the physical universe arrange themselves.
I would almost imagine it as like an electromagnetic fluid. So, but it's on a scale. It's not made of matter though.
No, it sounds like
non-material.
It sounds almost like when you blow smoke in a room where there's like some rays of light and it's all like, wee.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not actually seeing the light. You're just seeing the smoke in the light reflecting it. But you can kind of see like you could almost like grab the light beam. Like it's almost like a physical thing.
But this is like if you could make the smoke change shape with your mind. I had a dream I could do that with water once. Yes. It was the coolest dream ever.
And then something really interesting, and this is way off topic, but in Futurama, there was an instrument built off of this exact concept, and it would use this energy. So you would play it, and it would actually project what was going on in your mind. So you could daydream like a play or a musical and play this instrument, and it would show it up in the room like a hologram. So it's called a holophoner if you guys are Futurama fans. But I've always liked that concept because there is something like, how can we project this or actually like measure it or pull it out of the ether? Like the ether contains all of those ideas, thoughts, imagination, all of those things.
If there was a holophoner, I would just find a way to plug the podcast into it so I wouldn't have to find a way to make videos myself. But anyway.
Or it would just make a VR world for us like automatically.
Yeah, I'd probably be stuck in there for a while. So,
and then sorry. And then in UFOlogy, also a lot of the UFOs are driven by psychic power or whatever. Like there's no controls. Apparently they just steer the ship with their mind. This is another thing that like maybe you can build technology based on this field if we could like learn to understand it. So there's a lot of like, we should explore it further. It's not outdated at all.
So when you go to the dentist and you stick your teeth into the mold, right? And it's a gooey mold. That's how you get the shape. And then they take the gooey mold and they pour something in it and it hardens or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how UFOs work. In their mind, they kind of like gooey the mold. And then when they go into material universe, it like hardens into the metal or whatever it is.
But the gooey stuff would be the ether that forms the shape for the matter to come into. Yeah. That's exactly a perfect, yes.
I think they're natives, though, of that ether world. They're not natives of the material world. And so we can't wrap our heads around that. And so because we can't do that, there's no way for them to be like, oh, we're from another world. It's like,
because their vessels are different. They have to build their vessels from scratch, whereas ours grow out of the ground naturally. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I think we're in a place where we just don't think in a way where we would normally like wrap our heads around it. And they're like waiting for us to be like, get it? Yeah. It's like,
yeah, they want to communicate. It's like people waiting to communicate with ants or something.
Yeah, that sounds grim.
Well, have you ever played Sim Ant? It's pretty fun.
When I was a kid, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the astral light from Pope Pete's perspective. Sorry. What? Okay.
Come on. Did you hit yourself?
It is that plane which, in the lowest aspect, is the veriest of cesspools of the universe, comprising the facet of consciousness which directs the instincts and energies of animals. In the higher ramifications, soaring beyond this mundane sphere, it actually borders on the divine. That this is so may be realized by reference of the Tree of Life, which we will get into, on which the formative world is seen to include not only the sphere of Yesod, but in that classification of the tree and the four worlds, it will be perceived to extend far beyond Yesod to include Tiferet, the house of the soul, even to the edge of the abyss. The sphere of the foundation is only its most inferior phase. That's Yesod. As Yesod alone is that gross region of the metaphysical cosmos containing the cast-off astral remnants of living creatures, the bestial and mental filth sloughed off by human beings in the ascent after death to the higher planes. In its aspect of Chesed and Geburah, it is the most celestial heaven, so to speak, the divacanic abode. The divine astral is solar and celestial in nature, whereas the gross astral is lunar, reflective, and purely automatic. So we're actually going to get into every single color in the Qabalah. But before we get into the colors of the Qabalah and what they mean, I think it's time to talk a little bit about what color is in terms of science and see if we can extrapolate it out a little bit to what it means in magic and how to use it practically in ritual and psychology and maybe even heal yourself.
Right. And then, but light, even in our dimension is the same kind of substance. So at some point, in the spectrum, you're going to have some kind of color correspondence. Our eyes only line up with the visible spectrum that we know. But perhaps if you had a different set of eyes, you could see a lot wider range of colors that we're not able to see. But
certain insects and animals can. So they might see the sky as more purple because the sky has a lot of it has a lot of ultraviolet in it, but our eyes aren't really tuned to see it. We see blue.
Correct. Like it would look more like a weather map or a topology map. Like they would have a lot more color variation and gradation. But for us, we can only see visible light unless we have like infrared, goggles or some kind of technology to help us see more. And they did just invent these awesome glasses that allowed colorblind people to see color, which is amazing. I don't know how they do that.
That means colorblind people can fly B-2s and bomb people that don't have money.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dude, get out there, people. Sign up now.
But like, yes, at some point in the spectrum of light, there are it's the spectrum of colors, which is a rainbow. That's where you get the rainbow from, because it's like every single frequency of visible light that you can actually see with your eyes. So light actually extends way beyond what you can see, is what I'm saying. And all electromagnetic radiation technically is light. All of it is.
So like radio waves,
X-rays are light, radio waves, gamma rays, pretty much UV rays, everything, even if you can't see infrared, everything of that nature is light, but it's from one end of the spectrum. Basically, it's the frequency. So a radio wave, the frequency of a radio wave, if you were to measure from one end of the oscillation, yes, if you were to measure one end of the oscillation to the other, it's the size of like buildings and buses and stuff like that, like large objects. And then low frequency radio waves are shorter and they're about the size of a person or an animal. So and then you get into microwaves, which are, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then gamma radiation, which comes off of nuclear radiation is gamma radiation, basically. And this means that the light is vibrating at a frequency where the wavelength is as short as a subatomic particle. So that's how much energy. So if you had a foot of that, it would be exponentially more energy than just like a foot of a radio wave, or even a microwave is not that powerful.
But the way they travel can be different. Like you can block out a UV ray, right, with a big block of something, but a radio wave will go right around it.
UV ray. Yeah, radio waves go through your body because you can listen to the radio and put it behind you and you can still hear it. It's still picking up the signal because it just passes through your body. But UV rays, UV rays are just like this, just ultraviolet is just right above what we can't see, and the sun puts out a lot of it. Harmful stuff is blocked by the atmosphere, but UVA and UVB actually do make it, and that's the stuff that sunburns us, basically. So you can get a burn on your skin, but that's why we have skin, and that's why our skin evolved in this way, is because it's a protective barrier from our soft tissues, so that we don't get burned alive by the sun.
Right. And the way the different waves work is kind of interesting. So the sky is blue because the higher frequency waves get refracted and stuck in the atmosphere, basically.
Or absorbed. A lot of times, say the sky is blue, right? That's mostly due to the nitrogen content, because nitrogen, all of the entire composition of our atmosphere makes up the color of it, basically, all of it mixed together. But what it does is it absorbs every part of the light spectrum that we can see. If you can imagine the rainbow, right? You have a rainbow spectrum that all the light we can see. So the sky, what it's doing is the particles are absorbing every single frequency of light that's associated with any other color other than blue. And then the particles reflect mostly blue light back to us.
And then at sunset, only the red waves are getting through because they're a longer wavelength and they can penetrate. And that's why during the eclipse, when the Earth is in between the sun and the moon.
Yes, it's a filter.
Yeah,
our atmosphere acts as a filter of the light.
It's filtering out all the blue, and that's why the moon becomes red during a lunar eclipse?
Actually, the true color of moonlight is red. I read somewhere, and I thought that was crazy. Which is why if you go stargazing, you will often have a red light to read the maps, because you don't want to dilate your pupils. But anyway, moonlight is apparently actually red light, but we perceive it as white, or sometimes blue even.
Whoa.
But it's because of the absence of other colors. I can't explain it off the top of my head, but I just remember that was mind-blowing to me, because it literally is a lower wavelength of light, but for some reason we see it as white because of the atmosphere or something. I don't really know. I'll have to refresh myself. But
so basically, if you take a prism, like a crystal, and you put it in a dark room and you shine a white light at it, it'll split the light into its different frequencies and create a rainbow. And the frequencies we're talking about exist on the extremes of either end of that rainbow. In fact, I saw Mr. Wizard do an experiment where he had the kid hold his fingers all the way at the blue end of the rainbow. And then he had this UV reactive plate behind it. And then he did something with the lights to where he could see that the kid's hand was directly in the ray of the UV. He just couldn't see it with his eyes. And so, a crystal splits all those frequencies. And apparently, I had to look this up. The way a crystal splits the light, it works through basically the different, the different frequencies of light move through the medium at different rates and different angles. And then when they come out the other side, it fans them out into the rainbow, basically.
Yeah, what it does is it splits it. And I believe it's because not only of the shape of it, because usually prisms are it's like a cylinder in a triangle shape, kind of.
Yeah,
so
I think you're right. I think the shape helps.
the angle that it goes in actually makes a difference at like what is reflected out of it. But you can basically, the angle that you use, you can split the light more or less depending on how you turn the angle of where it impacts into the substance or the crystal, I guess, in this point. So when it hits the crystal, white light is basically, okay, if you were to view the entire rainbow all at once, it's like, yeah, white light is every single color in our visual spectrum being presented to us. So when you take away one color, it starts to change into something else. So that's why when it goes through the prism, because it goes through at an angle and it starts to refract, you start to see the different frequencies start to fan out inside the prism. So the red is the slowest, and it's at the bottom, and then it goes all the way up to the ultraviolet.
See, that's the thing, is red penetrates the furthest, though. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah, but only at certain angles. Like you said, when the sun sets, that's when we really get to see the red, and the blue is obstructed. The blue is not showing because we don't get enough of that refraction going on. And it's also travels through more atmosphere when it's setting.
So have you ever had those glasses where you put them on and it turns all the lights into like little rainbow hearts?
Kind of, but it's like doing a prism effect. Basically, it's skewing all the light out of synchronicity with each other.
Okay.
Like they're not synced. You can see multiple images.
Those are a scientific tool and a rave toy. So if you take those same glasses and you look at different types of like xenon light or laser or whatever emission, it'll show the correct like spectral band of that particular chemical or source of light.
Oh.
And that's essentially how we know what stars are made of.
Yeah, spectral analysis. Okay, this is fascinating. You can extrapolate what a substance is made out of by vaporizing it into a plasma and then detecting the rays of visible light, like basically the color of what it is. So you do a spectral analysis of if you burn some gas and it turns orange, you can put it in the spectral analysis, right? And then you can find out, say it's like helium and hydrogen mixed together, or oxygen and hydrogen, depending on how it burns. Each atomic element, so anything in its pure atomic form, if you put it into its plasma state, you can measure the color it makes and then see the visible light spectrum or the visible light frequencies that it puts out. And then if you vaporize another, like say a can, and you don't know what it's made out of, it could be aluminum or steel. So vaporize it, and then if you do a spectral analysis, you'll see a signature, the color signature of iron. You'll see also overlaid on top of that the color signature of carbon, and then on top of that you'll have the color signature of, say, like tin or aluminum or whatever that else is in it. So each element has you can do a spectral analysis on a pure element and then basically analyze any composition of any matter by just measuring what color it emits when you incinerate it.
So that is why you shoot first and ask questions later. And if you're eating your carrots, you will be able to do your spectral analysis correctly, right?
With lasers?
There's a meaning. We don't want to state it yet because that means the show's over. But what is the difference?
Lasers?
Okay, so you blow things apart, right? They plasma, and then you put on the rave glasses and you're like, oh, there's this much green, there's this much yellow, there's this much red. It must be fucking carbon or whatever, right? But what are these colors? What are these colors? That's what we got in. What is the difference between a red and a green?
It's a language.
It's vibration.
It is a vibration, but it's so crazy how we can how we respond to it every day too. We're intrinsically built to respond to color.
We can't name this episode vibration because if you just type in the whole rabbit vibration, you're probably going to get a dildo.
Oh god, this part.
But that's just a side. But okay, so if the electromagnetic spectrum were a dildo and you had it on its the lowest, if it's the visible light spectrum, the lowest setting, the lowest vibration, the slowest, that would be red, right? And if you turn that bitch all the way up, that's I don't know what I'm doing. That's UV. That's purples. That's purple.
No, is gamma wave.
Yeah, that's gamma. Well, we don't sell gamma wave dildos. UV
UV would be more like
Put a compressor on it.
like that.
Right. But that's the difference between the different light colors. And then if we're to believe both scientists and the esotericists, the difference between these colors is the frequency at which the solid or the fluid is vibrating, right?
Or in light's case, not like light doesn't propagate through material. It propagates through the ether, which is non-material.
And if it does propagate through material, it can be at different speeds, like water, crystal, the same thing with sound.
Correct. But because the medium, because there's matter present, the matter becomes dense. Like the denser matter is basically density. So in a vacuum, it travels speed of light, right? And then if it goes somewhere more dense, then it'll slow down or appear to slow down.
Okay, so the way we brought this up in I think it was the last episode, in the episode before last, we were talking about the shape of the universe and whether it was expanding or not, or if it was just folding in on itself like a bunch of self-eating bread. And we brought up the red shift and the blue shift. What's the red shift, Mari?
Well, I believe it's when something is flying away from you. So the light spectrum is skewed because the object is accelerating away from you.
It gets stretched.
Added. Basically the wavelength gets added onto because it's going away.
Yeah, it gets longer, so it gets more red.
Yeah, and then if it's accelerating towards you, it's going to appear blue, or
it gets pushed
bluer.
together. It's like it's like when an ambulance comes at you, and they always try to explain this to scientific language, but it's like it comes at you and it's like, you know what I mean? It comes at you all high pitched, and then it goes low pitched. So when it's coming at you, that's like the blue shift. It looks more blue or high pitched, and then when it's going away from you, it's red shifted and longer frequency.
Here's something that people that live in actual cities and places where people live could understand. Like a train. If a train's coming towards you, it goes, whoa, like that.
Yeah.
Or a car does that. Or cop sirens do that all the time. Like they woo 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 woo. Like it's like this weird, like that's how you know an ambulance is coming up behind you and to stop. Is you can hear the Doppler effect. That's how you know how close it is to you, or if it's coming or going. Like you can sense that yourself. But actually light waves do this as well. So that's all the Doppler effect is it's the same thing that you hear with sirens or stuff coming towards you and going away, like trains. It's the same thing, but with light.
Okay, well, now that we're here, let's talk about the different frequencies of light, meaning color, and what they mean both psychologically, practically, and Kabbalistically. I'm going to cut you off at the lower quaternary, though, for the free show, because I took an extra day to figure out why those two spheres were the colors they were. So, yeah, fair warning. It's good. I'm gonna cut off your rainbow if you don't pay me $5.
Oh, no. That's gay hate.
I'm gonna cut your rainbow.
Oh, God.
All right, so I think oh God, this is the wrong way to end it. So the light that gets split, right, that contains all the other ones and it occupies the top of the tree of life is brilliance, but we can't really talk about that because that's not a color.
White.
It's white, but that's associated with Chokmah, or wisdom, and caps the pillar of mercy on the left side of the tree of life. There's
a different, like, higher, wholer light.
Yeah, it's not even white. It's pure brilliance. Radiation. That's what Trump was looking for when he was looking at the eclipse. So, as Kether is considered pure brilliance, the milky whiteness of the stars is associated with this Sephira and is considered projective. Chokmah is the line to Kether's point and might be symbolized by a scepter raised, while Kether borrows from the boundless, limitless, and perfected nature of the Ein Sof. It is essentially motionless and balanced, where Chokmah is pure dynamism, motion, and freedom. Not so much a receptacle, but a vector of the force itself. The Sefer Yetzirah refers to the second path as illuminating intelligence, of which Oliver St. John makes the following comment. The glyph of Venus, Our Lady of Love, uniquely embraces the whole tree of life. The title of the 14th of Path of Venus, or Dalet, is the door of the mysteries, is the luminous intelligence. It is named thus because it is illuminated by Hawk wisdom. Light is transmitted along the 14th path to be veiled in form or containment of Bina. The Aramaic word for illumination or luminous shining used to be the title of the path of Venus, and its name was Mer. The root of the word is ire, or light, which can mean the light of a lamp or the light of day. The word has a special occult significance where it refers to spirit light, the channel by which consciousness awareness can move upwards and downwards on the planes via the middle pillar of equilibrium, Baphomet. Thus, we can think of consciousness or intelligence in terms of transmission or radiation. The occult meaning of ire, the magical light, is best conveyed through the ancient Egyptian root of the word, which is spelled exactly the same when transliterated from hieroglyphics. The Egyptian ire has many variant meanings, depending on how it is spelled and pronounced. Here are a few meanings of the word ire: to conceive, a stream or river, radiation, brilliance, light. He goes on to explain that the Egyptian glyph for ire or light is the flowering reed in child, and explains the whole mystery of parthenogenesis, like basically like being born without a father or mother, the magical child being born without physical intervention. He says the real occult secret and the potency behind the magic of light begins and ends with the enter of the threshold, who the alchemist figured is Azoth, who is what we said Baphomet symbolized.
Sounds like Jesus too.
He's the light in the way.
So
Cut me a record
interesting.
deal.
What R? It looks like R, AUR, which is where aura comes from,
Yes.
which is your spiritual field. And the path of Venus, which you mentioned, is mare or mire.
Yeah.
In Romance languages from Latin base, mare or mare is ocean or body of water.
Just like Hathor is a womb of water, and because
Correct.
Venus is a womb, it makes sense that the light is a carrier then.
Yes, and it contains every frequency, every color.
Oh, it's
Because
literally pregnant
light-
with all the others.
Correct. Light is additive. So if you combined opposite colors of light, you'll get white light because they'll combine together and make the full frequency of light.
Now, when we are talking about artwork and design and just psychology, designing buildings and lobbies and stuff like that, how is white used and what does it mean?
First of all,
Hospitals are usually white.
white is the absence of pigment or the fullness of light. White objects are reflecting all of the colors of the spectrum. So the material that is white doesn't absorb any of the light radiation, so you don't see a color.
So it's perceived as clean or pristine.
Clean or empty, sometimes empty, but in a satisfying, or maybe even like it might stimulate curiosity because it is a light. It's like a light backdrop. But it's not. It doesn't feel like a void, is what I'm saying. It doesn't feel like there's something absent. It feels pure and empty and plain. It can feel unnerving, but it is very like calm and still, and it doesn't change. Like it's classic. And people perceive it. It's basically a neutral color, but it also represents purity, like you would wear it for a wedding, right? Or it represents virginality, like a virgin or air, or like you said, pure, being pristine. Something interesting that I did find in my research is that in other cultures, white is also associated with the dawn, or like when the sun rises, like the morning, which this is in mostly Eastern cultures, because in the West, dawn is associated with red
Or yellow.
Yellow would be midday.
Sure.
Or daytime in general. They also perceive white as a color of mourning, like for death. So
it's feminine too, isn't it? Where white is feminine and then red is masculine?
Yes, but I feel like that's Eastern.
Yes.
Because in the West, I feel like that's Western. Because in the East, Yang, the feminine is black, and the active element, the white, is masculine.
On the yin yang.
And then but these are Eastern things. And then like also they use white like for mourning of the dead, whereas we use black. So there's small, like if you have a different culture, you're gonna have slight differences in how people perceive color, but overall there are some really like basic interpretations pretty much span throughout all cultures.
Man, white for a funeral sounds kind of cool.
But it kind of makes sense because it's like purity and clean, and it's a unifying color too because it's all of the colors in one. So it might be more a positive spin on that, but there's other reasons why we use black for that.
Okay. Now let's move all the way over to black. Like the womb of space. Actually, even though space is black, it's full of light. This is so much of the Qabalah it hurts. Dion and Oliver both say this Sefirot, Bina, which receives the light of wisdom, or Hakma, and then it is the one to clothe it in form. While Hakma is like the male impulse to growth, Bina takes this impulse and binds it into discrete forms, which necessarily limit and render its death inevitable. All things born of woman must die, after all. This is why she is both the supernal mother and the capstone of the pillar of severity. In Gnostic terms, it could be said to take the unbounded energy of the Sophia, or wisdom, which is emanated without a pair from Kether, and binds it into the golden spiral we see everywhere, which was once straight, radiant, and pure dynamism, has been bound into the looping spiral about itself. Plants are bound to grow in the spiral, atoms and electrons are bound by their spin, as are the planets, satellites, and even suns to their galactic core. I suspect the lion serpent of the Gnostics may have been a deeply cynical view of the golden section, and a morose vision of the Sephira, which, according to all its associated imagery, Saturn included, seems to fit this energetic signature. Pope Pete jumps past all the bullshit and just says this generative living and dying process of sex, birth, and death is the price we pay for having an evolutionary spiral at all. Go figure, the lion is the apex of the animal realm. So the image of the Demiurge and the material world and the whole process of divine light being bound into evolution and time, it all kind of comes together in the Sephira of Bina, which is black. And so what are the psychological associations? Where do we see the color black? What kind of building would we put it in? What does it mean?
I mean, a lot of luxury brands use it. So it's used to
Mercedes, BMW.
Right. It's to represent a lot of power or seriousness.
Saturn is both of those. He's the taskmaster.
Because if you mix it with black, or if you mix black and white, you get a nice classic look, which is timeless. It's good with anything. And also gray is basically an iteration of these two colors combined. So you get your neutral palette, which can work with any color at any time and any place.
Timeless. So interesting how those colors are timeless and they're above the abyss and the Qabalah. You're onto something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is all interrelated, and this is why it works so well. This is why people study color psychology. I mean, I work in marketing and advertising, and I design stuff, and you wouldn't believe how much I have to think about picking colors. And because it affects their minds. When you bring up the concept of black or like the color of pure blackness, or just a field of black, what people connotate it with is negativity, nighttime. Obviously, that's just a natural biological response. Fear, because you can't see anything, which is also a response due to nighttime. We're nocturnal species. Space, which, like you were saying, is the feminine womb in which everything goes on.
And it's full of light, technically.
And then mystery and concealment, which is like being in the shadows. It's like having power, but you're not overt about it. And then people associate it with evil because of this.
Yeah, all the bad guys in Star Wars,
because evil lie. They lie, and they are sneaky, and they backstab, and that's kind of the connotation of. That's why black is perceived as evil in many cultures. Like, this is one of the things that most cultures agree on. Black is evil.
Do you remember when cops used to wear blue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which was actually a professional color of communication, and it's a calming color. So you probably should go back to wearing it.
It has to do with the establishment and using your force correctly without using too much of it. Also,
like a business deal.
Yeah. That's why it's used in banks. But now we're into blue, so we're.
But black is about evil because it's also connotated with death. Like, we wear it at our funerals for mourning, like I was saying earlier. Like, the Western cultures tend to use black to show that they're sad about something or that they're shut down.
Would you go to a funeral?
So like a widow or a widower would wear black for about a year or so after the death of their spouse. But it's a social signal to tell any suitors, don't come trying to date me right now.
Oh.
Like, we humans intrinsically use color as signals, and this is built into I just want to touch on this note, is this is basically from our biology, is we learn these instinctual associations with colors based on life and death, like what we can eat, what we can't eat, and social patterns. So all of the stuff in psychology has to do with, the Qabalah and human nature and everything that we do is related to color, really.
Well, we brought this up on another show, but evolutionarily speaking, we may have been selected to see color so well because of serpents, and the monkeys who saw the colors better were the ones who passed on their genes. And so the
This
association
specific
between
yeah.
like light and the serpent and the force of life and death, it kind of makes sense even evolutionarily speaking.
That's why we're tuned into this specific band of color. If that makes, like, if we saw every color on the spectrum, we'd go crazy. There'd be no way to parse that.
And that's why you don't take too much acid.
Oh, yes.
So if it's nighttime and there starts to be a little bit of sun, then the black turns, and it's not really black. And this is what Nuit says in the Book of the Law. It's like, well, I'm black to the idiots. Shouldn't say it that way. But she's like, I'm actually like purple and gold to the people who love me. So, okay, the sky's black because we're idiots. But as you get a little bit more light, okay, it starts to become blue. And I'm actually pretty sure that there's the other is, we're just talking about the queen scale of Qabalah, okay? There's a king scale and there's a prince scale or princess scale. They don't call it that. It's I don't know. You get the point. This is, okay. This is the one everyone's familiar with. Let's just go with it. So,
I like blue.
So blue makes the most sense as the next color because the sun of Tiferet is starting to come in. Now, blue is the color commonly associated with Chesed, and it's known as the cohesive intelligence. It's symbolized by Jupiter, which also kind of looks like a 4, the number of its sphere, and is analogous to a cross. It's anabolic, growth, and gathering drive, where just across the street, Mars Gavura is catabolism, essentially. It's the first embodied manifestation from beyond the void, so it makes some sense that the color is blue. A note down from the transpersonal ultraviolet above, calming and trust-inducing. Even banks use blue because of this quality. Dion Fortune says that anytime somebody walks into a fresh strip of land, surveying it for its qualities and seeing it for its usefulness, it's using the quality of this sphere. This aligns with how Peter Carroll describes blue magic, as money magic likes to double and grow itself by nature. Likewise, when something is blue shifting, it's getting closer. Its expansive nature is sometimes associated with fire, as is the platonic solid and the tetrahedron it is said to be associated with, as it is the most basic solid possible. Its fourness allows its dimensionality, solidity, and makes it the most stable shape. Symbols of kingship are associated with it, as the kingdom is the extension of the king's body, who, if virtuous to first principles, the stuff above the abyss, will see his kingdom grow in wealth, mercy, and vitality. He is the king in peacetime, though capable in war, as the next sphere, Geburah, emanates from him. So this is like a coagulative sphere. It's anabolic, essentially.
And oh man, this is just really cool because it makes sense. Because even in Hinduism, the chakra that's blue is your throat chakra, and actually even your third eye is kind of somewhat blue. So
that's
face,
like the ultra.
Your face is the place of the color blue, like where you speak and where you think. So it's a color of intelligence and communication. Absolutely.
Well, it's funny because as it gets reflected down through the lower quaternary, it becomes Hod, which is associated with communication, but we will get to that.
A lower iteration of it, which would be it would be located in your throat. You're right below ultraviolet, which would be closer to the third eye in the chakral system, which is more about intellect. It's about intellect, but it's also about connecting with others in a way that you can cooperate or grow closer to someone, make a group of people, or a team. Like you can coach a team with the blue energy. Like to be a leader, you would need this color of energy. Like
the Kabbalists are like, it's the energy of things coming together. And then the blue shift is like, something's coming towards you. It's like, how did they know that? Like what the?
Yeah. And it's very cool too, because businesses, like any kind of like financial, like you said, banks, any kind of business or communications companies will often use blue. Like Facebook's logo is blue. Twitter's, there's so many examples, and blue
Chase
represents
Bank.
For color, like this is just, and I'm an American, so it could be different for around the world, but basically it's a calming and relaxing color. And that's cool because it's about making deals and communication and cooperation, but it's a friendly color. It's not aggressive. It's not competitive. It's cooperative. And that's the point. The part of the Qabalah where you're talking about wealth in blue, yes, blue will bring you wealth, but it's because you're well-spoken, or that you're able to communicate your ideas ideas eloquently, you're charming, you're funny, like you're able to use language in a way that can bring people together, and it coalesces them perhaps into a company that makes you money. Like, okay, so, but this is money through intelligence and coaching people and leading people. But also blue is associated with sadness. Like, you ever heard someone say, hey, are you feeling blue today? People associate it with sadness. And I think that has to do a lot with the weather association, which would be rain. It's associated with water. So the positive side would maybe be like a lake or a pristine lake or a beautiful beach with that wonderful calming blue water and the blue sky. But like a sad blue would be like that dreary blue on a rainy day, or the blue when the sun has gone, that nice blue color that comes at twilight and it's kind of somber. It feels somber and
it's
quiet.
Also calming. Blue is so calming.
It's calming, but it's not necessarily depressing, but it can be sad.
It's so calming, in fact, that people completely ignore that the Chase Bank logo is essentially a swastika made of little communist hammers.
Oh shit. Oh, and I have another.
Oh, it makes me feel so happy. It's blue.
Oh, I have the best story about blue that I found. Okay.
Pink Floyd's The Wall just plays quietly in the background.
Okay. You ever, in Japan, they have a lot of suicide problems.
I've heard that, but we do too.
Well, they have it kind of worse, but
it's
anyway.
a little different in their culture because
really
the Romans are like, look, you have choices in life. You don't like being a slave? You could just kill yourself. You see? Choice, free will. You have it.
Yeah. Well,
and then us over here, we're like, yeah, I guess I could always do that. I guess that's an option. But then over there, it's like, if you like in certain times and places in like Japan, right? If you fuck up, that looks bad on your whole family, and like you can make good for it. Basically. You can make good for it by like cutting out your own guts, which I hear is fairly painful.
Well, they don't do that now. Now they just jump in front of subway trains like randomly. But
they make that sound like it'd be painless. I don't think so. I think that would suck ass for like a minute.
Don't rage quit. That's for pussies. But okay, guys, this was so cool. Okay, it's not cool that people kill themselves in Japanese subways. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. But they painted, because of color psychology, they did some research on this, and they actually ended up painting the subway walls blue in their train stations, and it reduced the rate of people jumping in front of trains, suicide, by 77%.
That's incredible.
Isn't that crazy? And then, like you can just paint, if the environment emanates a certain color, you can actually affect people's moods. I mean, this is used everywhere and you're going to see it.
So maybe we're using the wrong colors before somebody takes a loan in America. Maybe we should paint our banks red. So they're like, you want to take this loan? You want to take this loan? Do it now.
Bank of America's red, and they like did all the fucking foreclosure loans.
Oh, it makes so much sense. Because that's the next color in the Qabalah. Like if you're doing testicles, spectacles, wallet, and watch. Like spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. We did the spectacles as white. You got to pay for testicles, buddy. The
red one. The red one is your gonad.
So we just did wallet, which is blue, also associated with banks, and then watch, which strangely is also associated with time. So that stupid phrase makes Kabbalistic sense as well. So you can use that in your prayers.
I'm telling on you.
You can literally just say that dumb little thing instead of,
skip colors. I'm mad at you.
Okay. So red is associated with Gevurah or power, and sometimes called Pachad, which means fear.
Right.
It is the catabolic side to blue Jupiter's anabolism. It is a process. Oh,
Where's green?
We're getting there.
Green? I don't see it. Oh, Jesus, it's all the way down there. Okay, I'm sorry.
There's a reason for that, though. Okay. I really looked for it, too, and I found it. So red is like the opposite of the blue, where blue is anabolic, red is catabolic. It's the process of destruction that occurs by existing within a sphere of activity or time, and as such carries out the will of the Sefirot above it, Bina, but at a lower octave. Where blue collects, red projects. If something in space is being redshifted, it's moving farther away from you. If it's cutting and astringent, and you're cleaning something, you're also using Gevurah force. It's associated with iron, what makes blood and rust red, a watery substance which must remain moving for us to stay alive. I can't think of a better example than period blood, because it's a catabolic excretion from the black mother void in the absence of fertilization to clear out the way for making more possibility and more life, which probably
And
is purple on the inside.
it comes
So
from your red chakra too.
yeah. And so this is the sphere that like all the old esoteric Hebrew Kabbalists are like, this is where the evil comes from. It's like an out of balance that comes from the red Sephira of Gevurah or judgment. There's an overabundance of judgment. And so this is echoed, of course, in Star Wars because all the bad guys have the red lightsabers and they're all, they think in absolutes and they demand, and even their symbolism is red, right? So in the tradition of Qabalah being perfectly reflected in Star Wars for some dumb reason, it makes perfect sense.
So that pretty much lines up. All of this is lining up great, which is really cool. This is why I got into spirituality and color theory color psychology. Also, I wanted to note Carl Jung was the one that kind of developed this in the modern iteration that we have. Red is probably the hottest tone we have. It's the warmest one.
It's the bestest one.
It's the hottest one. So it's related to hot. So you get red hot. I also saw this study. This was really funny. Men perceive women as more attractive if they're wearing red. And also it only works on heterosexual women though. Heterosexual women find males attractive in red, but
No way.
men aren't affected if they're looking at men, and then women aren't affected if they're looking at other women.
That's wild.
So that's why the pinup calendars for chicks always have fire guys on them, like the firemen. I don't know. That's just something I thought of like randomly. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. And then it's related also to violence, obviously, because it's the color of blood and death.
Aggression.
And then passion, which passion can mean love, but it could also mean like a lustful passion where you kill people because they cheated on you or something. Like it can mean any kind of like ecstasy that you go into due to an emotion. Like it could be an emotion at an extreme. It just means absolute off the chart energy. It represents love, and I mean mature love, as in also sex. And when I say love, I mean like lovers, as in like if you're married off to someone in an arranged marriage, you're gonna have some lovers on the side, right? That's the red is the kind of love that you would have with that lover. The passion and the desire, and the desire for it's like what are they, excitement chasers or people that like adrenaline? That's the kind of energy that goes with that passion. And then it's associated with speed, which actually, if sports teams wear red or red cars, are perceived as moving faster, and people will actually move and drive faster if red is present.
And cops are more likely to pull over a red car.
Yeah, because they are more likely to speed because the person is in a red car. It makes you feel faster.
But even if they're not speeding, the cop might notice them easier or think they're speeding.
But yes, red is an aggressive triggering color. They're going to assume the driver is aggressive because it's a red car, because the driver chose a red car.
Did you know that red cars get hit more than other cars by other cars? Like the person driving the red car isn't doing fuck all wrong, and somebody else will hit you. That happens more frequently in red cars for some reason.
Conflict, it's about conflict.
I don't even get that. You would think that we'd be tuned to be like, oh, that's some red shit. Don't hit it. You know what I mean? But it works the opposite somehow.
You kind of want to fuck with it. And then a lot of poisonous animals, not only do they use yellow, but they use red to symbolize that they're red really means they're poisonous though. Like if you have red and yellow touching on an animal, that means it's going to kill you if it bites you or stings you or whatever. So, but red by itself could mean just like stay the fuck away from me, because there are berries that are red that are poisonous, and this is why we associate red with negativity, because a lot of times we experience seeing the color red when we were having a negative thing happen, or when we had a rush of adrenaline, we would see red, or like seeing red means you're just fucking angry. So it is also associated with that too.
Yeah, if anything in your body becomes like red and engorged and like expressive, it's probably sick, unless it's
sexy.
Unless it's your private parts.
And then an infection could be violence or conflict.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a war in your body. So yeah, all of that is related.
And stuff.
And it means stop.
It means stop.
Or losses in financial markets.
Like next time you're in bed with someone, you just have one of those like crossing guard stop signs, and the second you're over it, you just like hold up the sign. Like, and the sign has been raised. So moving on to Tifereth. Now this is where it drops down a level in between the red and the blue. which makes some sense in terms of color. Tifereth, the solar sphere, is the child of these forces and becomes the reflection of Kether, but at a lower octave. But also, Yesod at a higher octave. It serves as the balance between the red and blue sphere, which created it, but also the whole entire fucking tree.
Wow, cool.
Every other of the Sefirot is connected directly to it, aside from Malkuth. Tifereth, therefore, must never be regarded as an isolated factor, but as a link, a focusing point, a center of transition or transmutation. The central pillar is always concerned with consciousness. The two side pillars with the different modes, the operation of force on different levels. That's Dion Fortune. It is the incarnated ideal of Kether, and as such is sacrificed God, or is the sacrificed God, I should say. For the incarnation of God ideal speaks likewise to its disincarnation as well. In order that the form may be stabilized, the component forces out of which it is built must be brought into equilibrium. Therefore, do we find the idea of the mediator or redeemer inherent in this Sephira. When the Godhead in its very self manifests in form, the form must be perfectly equilibrated. One might with equal truth reverse this proposition and say that when the forces building a form are perfectly equilibrated, the Godhead itself is manifesting in that form according to its type. God is made manifest among us when the conditions permit of manifestation.
Something interesting. The yellow chakra is your solar plexus, and it's directly in the center of your body.
Yup. Pope Pete says that the dumbest shit ever written has been about this sphere and about this color and about this energy, because it's essentially the ego.
Yes.
It's one's charisma, it's one's naturally dominant tendencies, and it's one's, he says there's no English word for this, laughter creativity. It's one's laughter creativity.
Confidence, self-esteem. Let's be real.
Yeah, I don't
You
have
can
a word
laugh at
for it
your-
because I don't know what that is.
Laugh at yourself. If you make a mistake, you can laugh at yourself and make it fun. It's laughter creativity. You can make a good thing out of a bad thing. That's what self-esteem is, and positive, putting yourself out there positively, not in a naturally dominant tendencies. Okay, as in naturally dominant as like people want you to dominate them.
Yeah,
not that
basically.
you're forcing them to. Like, this is a magnetic thing. This is people want your personality. Like, this is a good thing.
Like you're in a
It's to
group
balance
project
out-
and they're like, so who's gonna present this? And they all look at you and you're like,
Yeah, it balances out your upper half, which is your thought and your brain, and it balances your lower half, which is your subconscious and your sexual urges and your anger and stuff like that. So that's so cool that it's Yesod, because it's a pivot point, and that that's so cool that yellow is just in the center of everything. But you know what's really funny is that statistically, it's everyone's almost least favorite color. It's like the second least favorite color of everybody.
it's very low percentage. It's also the most pain in the ass color paint to deal with, and it's so weak. It's so weak. If you put any color on it, it's so dainty, it gets overpowered so easily. Yeah, like if you buy like cheap red, it might come out like more pink or whatever, or you might just need more layers to put on it. But like if you buy cheap yellow versus expensive yellow, it's not even comparable. It's ridiculous. It's like a different thing entirely. It's ridiculous.
Anyway, it doesn't go very long if you mix it. That's what I'm saying, is it's the weakest pigment, which I think is kind of cool, because it's one of the strongest colors we have. It's the brightest. It's one of the brightest. It looks like gold. A lot of people liken it to that in wealth.
Gold is the most conductive metal too, which makes sense that it's associated with this sphere.
And it's related with the sun and happiness and warmth and energeticness and being joyful.
What does everything go around in the solar system?
The sun.
How those Kabbalists know?
I think that's a representation also of your ego.
It is,
so
100%.
If you have a healthy ego, you're going to be joyful and mirthful, which is what you're talking about, that creative comedy. And yellow is also a very comedic color. I mean, orange is too, but I think yellow is pretty playful.
It's spontaneous too.
And children like it. Children love yellow, but adults hate yellow. It's one of children's favorite colors for some reason, but adults love blue. Most adults like blue, and that's my favorite color.
You know what this sphere reminds me of? It reminds me of Zaphod Beelbrox, just a little bit.
Oh my God.
He's kind of got his solar head, which is like his personality that everyone likes. That's like what the galactic president or some shit.
It's the lower one.
And then he's got like his lunar head.
What do we do?
It's his automatic, right? His automatic consciousness. Like even he is a very good Kabbalistic representation of the universe.
That yellow though, isn't he? He's got the higher spheres than the lower, but not the middle one. Yellow also though, because it's so bright and attention catching, it's also a signal to be careful. of something, because a lot of bugs and plants that are poisonous use yellow to indicate that you shouldn't eat them, or you might get stung and have a reaction. So what I'm saying is yellow can be a cautionary color, and we also use it on caution symbols. Like that's pretty much anytime you see a roadwork sign or be careful, slow down, a yellow light means slow down. That's what I'm saying is it's a cautionary, but it's not red. It's not like something bad's happening yet. It's just like, hey, be careful.
And if you'd like to avoid those warnings, please go to www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where for just $5, you will get all our extended episodes, a bonus sticker, and access to our Discord server, where you are free to discuss all the colors of the rainbow, even colors that don't exist, because why not? So thank you, everybody. Mari, you know what to do.
Eat carrots and shoot lasers.